Our guest on the Motivation Show is a MacArthur Fellow and National Humanities Medalist, and the author of The Mattering Instinct: How Our Deepest Longing Drives Us and Divides Us. If you are curious about why we all seek to matter to ourselves and others, then no one better to explain this than an author of 10 books. Welcome to the Motivation Show, Rebecca Newberger Goldstein.
Well, thank you. Very good to be here, Eli.
Well, I'd like to start by getting a sense of how you wrote 10 books and how long did it take to write 10 books.
This is actually my 11th. I haven't
11, all
updated,
right.
I haven't updated my site. So, uh, yeah, well, I don't know. I think writing books helps me to think. And since I think for a living, that's my job, it's natural to write books. I would rather write articles because they're over more quickly. But I often start an article and then, and in fact, and that's true of this latest book. It was supposed to be an article, and it turned into a book. Why? Because things were complicated.
Yeah, life is complicated, all right. So, can
Yes.
you give us a little bit about your background and your schooling and things like that qualify you to write 10 books and such a thought-provoking book such as The Mattering Instinct?
Oh, yeah, well, I started in the sciences and math in college. I was interested in what I thought were the deepest questions to be asked, like, where are we? What kind of universe is this? Is it for us or against us? What are we supposed to do with ourselves? And in the short time we have here. And it was really towards my senior year that I decided that it was really philosophy of science I was most interested in. And so I got my doctorate at Princeton in philosophy of science. Um, and I guess that is what gave me the license to think about any big question I wanted to think about. I've gotten more and more interested. I'm still very interested in science, and there is science in my book, on this latest book, but I'm most interested now in the human dimension. How does this all speak to us and what our lives are about and what we're after and what we ought to be after? So yes, I think I've gotten much more interested in the human aspect of all of these questions.
So, is mattering and wanting to be significant pretty much the same thing? And what has been your experience on why some people seem to have to matter and have to be incredibly significant, and others
Yeah.
seem to be a little bit more complacent about that thought?
I think, and this is something that takes some argument because I don't think it's immediately apparent. And as you say, there seems to be such a difference in the way that people go about trying to fulfill what I argue is shared by all of us. And that is that we want to justify ourselves in our own eyes. We have to give ourselves a tremendous amount of attention in order to pursue a human life. A human life is a very complicated thing to pursue. And it's stretched out over time. And, we're always paying attention to our environment and how it affects us. We're making plans for our future. And when we're actually not paying attention to our environment, when what's operating is our brain is what the neuroscientists call the default network mode, we're just kind of fantasizing. We're fantasizing about ourselves. We pay a lot of attention to ourselves. We're wired to do so. But the human animal has this amazing capacity brought to us by way of these very big brains that we have evolved to step outside of ourselves, look at ourselves as if at another person, and ask, well, what makes you so special? Why do you spend so much time thinking about yourself? Is there any way you can justify this in your own eyes? And that's what unleashes what I call the mattering instinct. Somehow or other, we want to answer that question, justify ourselves in our own eyes. And if we don't, um, the consequences are really calamitous. That is what deep depression is all about. In fact, and this is really quite poignant, The U.S. suicide helpline is www.youmatter.com, because that's what is so deprived in people who are suffering from deep depression, that they don't feel that they matter. There's no way to justify themselves in their own eyes. And that turns to self-loathing. So this is a deep, commonly shared instinct, but we minister to it in many different ways. Some people need tremendous amount of attention. Some people minimal amount of attention from others. So it causes great difference. Some people look to God for justification. Some people are looking to for secular responses. In fact, I map out 4 different strategies that we use in trying to uh, appease this need that gives us our existential dimension. One of the things I always say is, it's hard to be human. It's not enough for us just to survive. We want to convince ourselves that we have a reason to survive, that we're justified in putting so much energy into our survival. Complicated creatures.
I was just watching a video on George Reeves, who played Superman in the original Superman series,
Yes.
and he died in 1959, and supposedly of a suicide. And supposedly the theory was that he was so depressed because he was typecast as Superman, he couldn't get other roles, and his significance and his sense of mattering was so severely reduced that he didn't see the point in living any longer. Now,
Yeah.
here you got a
Yeah.
guy who is idolized even today by, billions of people, you
Yes.
would think that he would have every reason to live. And, how many of us are idolized? Most of
Yes.
us, we toil in anonymity,
That's
and
right.
we go on. So can you
That's
speak to
right.
that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it's uh I have cases like that in my book, of people who were idolized and reached very high standards. You would have thought that that itself would have pleased them, but we have we have different temperaments, different passions, interests. And what it takes to please different people is as diverse as what we need in order to convince ourselves that we matter. So that this is, I think this really gets to the deepest differences between us, and some of the most fierce controversies between us, because whatever it is that you think is necessary, um, for you to be living a life that isn't a waste. That's basically what we want, right? We don't want to feel like our time here is a complete waste. We devote our lives mean the world to us. They mean all the world to us, and to think that they're a waste is intolerable. But what we need to convince ourselves of this varies across the board. It's one of the most interesting diversities between us. I'm completely fascinated by it. And if you sit next to me for long enough on a plane or a bus, I'm going to get you talking about how you go about appeasing this existential need that you have in virtue of being human. So yeah, it's very, very interesting how some people, we often use the attention of others. Basically, to matter means to be deserving of attention, and it's really our own attention that we want to feel deserving of. Um, and but if for many of us, if a lot of people pay us attention, that's good evidence that we are deserving of our own attention. But it doesn't necessarily work. It works for some people. Um, Not for others. And the reason that it may not work is it is really oneself that you're trying to convince. You may feel like an imposter. Um, all this attention is based on false premises. These people are being tricked in thinking that you are so
The
deserving of
imposter
their
syndrome.
attention. Exactly. And so it's just, all of these variations that go into it. The one thing that I would say, which is to me, especially at this moment in our time when we see each other with a minimum of charity, when we disagree with one another, our polarization obviously has gotten very, very extreme. that, and this is what caused me to write this book at this particular moment. Um, this little sort of crisis in mattering that's going on. There doesn't seem to be enough for everybody to get enough. And so we grab at it like a bunch of children under a piñata, just grabbing what's left for us. Um, the most important thing is to see that this deep and poignant and motivation is operating in all of us. Wherever there is a human life, there is a person longing to somehow feel that they matter. And that is to see one another with some degree of charity.
What does it even mean to matter to ourselves?
Yeah.
That's I think, something to think about, like, what are we trying to prove to
How
ourselves?
do we guess? And as it that's here the basic question is yeah, you step outside of yourself, we can reflect on ourselves as if we're another person. This is what these very complicated brains of ours allow us to do. Um, and and ask for some kind of justification for spending so much energy, so much attention, so much time devoted to oneself. If to matter means to be deserving of attention, then judging by how much attention we each give ourselves, and we are in a very good position, an optimal position to see how much attention we give ourselves, judging how much attention we give ourselves, it would seem that we judge ourselves to be the most important thing in all, the thing that matters the most in all the universe, because we each pay ourselves so much attention. And yet we all know, short of lunacy, that that's not the case. We all know we are not the thing that matters the most in all the universe. We all have some degree of perspective and can see that. And that causes some kind of uneasiness in us, this existential unease. The existentialist philosophers spoke about this at great length. They called it the absurd, how much attention we pay to ourselves and how much attention we actually can justify paying ourselves. That's to confront the absurd. And we go to work trying to make it a little less absurd, trying to prove, yeah, we deserve some attention. By the way we're living our lives. But that's where we really diverge, the way we go about trying to prove to ourselves, yeah, we're deserving of some of this vast attention, relentless attention that we pay ourselves.
I
So
find for
yeah,
myself, I meet two kinds of people. One who are overly indulged in paying attention to themselves and mattering so much to themselves that I consider it somewhat selfish. And then there are those that are very nurturing and have a sense of selflessness by always wanting to do good things for other people.
yes,
And
yes, yes,
without the feeling of getting something in return, because anybody can do something, with an ulterior motive, but
exactly,
to
yes,
do something where there's no return. For instance, if somebody is dying, what return are you really going to get, other than maybe a good feeling that you're being pretty righteous? But a lot of people will avoid the dying person because there's nothing in it for them.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
when does it become sort of like unhealthy in terms of mattering too much to yourself, and also unhealthy because you're
Yeah.
devoting too much, elsewhere?
Well, I think everybody is at heart trying to justify themselves and all the attention that they have to pay to themselves in order to uh, pursue these complicated lives that we live. Uh, and the person who is doing it by way of ministering it to others, that is what makes them feel, that's what justifies themselves in their own eyes, you know. So this mattering instinct doesn't mean that we're by nature selfish. Quite the contrary. To me, the fact that we have this existential dimension, which actually forces us to think about values, that's what brings values into our lives. And that this is rather is a noble aspect of human nature. So, I'm not equating it at all with selfishness. In some people, it does play out as sheer selfishness. Selfishness means um, that you only want to do things in your own self-interest. If it's not in your self-interest, you're not going to do it. And so, there's always got to be a payoff for oneself, which is very, very different from this kind of justificatory uh, uh, activity that I think all of us are one way or another involved in. For some people, I mean, so there are four basic strategies that I've um, distinguished in speaking to probably at this point hundreds of people about how they go about ministering to this. And one is what I call the transcenders, and they have a sort of religious or spiritual response to it. And for most of human history, that's how we went about trying to justify ourselves in our own eyes, that we were made in the image of God, that the transcendent being that created the universe and the laws of nature and the moral order created us and created us with a purpose. And that's and to the extent, and we matter in God's eyes. We are made in the image of God, as the Old Testament says. And so there's that way, and there are still many people, and that is how they how they think about when I ask these questions about mattering. They answer in these religious or spiritual terms. There are what I call socializers, and to them, mattering means mattering to others. It's really, and we all want to matter to others. We're gregarious creatures, evolved from gregarious creatures. So there's that social element in all of us. But
Why is it that some people don't make an effort to matter to others? Because I know a lot of people that literally make no effort
no,
whatsoever.
Evan, yeah.
Yeah, they're just they're not bad people. They're just indifferent. They just don't seem to care. Maybe they do, but they don't show it.
They don't show it. I mean, they might just think that this is coming to them. Maybe they grew up in a household and they were just showered with a sense of being deserving of attention, and they just expect it to come to them. Or it could be that they have other ways of going about trying to matter, and people don't function in it. And people who I call the heroic strivers are such people to some extent. They have some standards of excellence that they need to meet. Could be intellectual, could be artistic, it could be athletic, it could be ethical. But these are just to live with themselves. They have to realize these standards of excellence. I spend my life mostly with people of this sort. I'm an academic, right?
I'm
And
thinking that might be me, but
could be, it
can you
could
fit
be.
into all four
There
categories
can
or
be
two of the categories?
aspects, yes,
Yeah,
there
the
can be
aspects. Okay,
aspects of all of it,
I'm
but
feeling a little bit of each
and
category.
every,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes. And sometimes I can move through the day and feel like I'm going through all of these, Um, but yeah, I mean, I've known, I started out in the hard sciences in math and physics, and I knew a lot of mathematicians who sort of, I mean, math was their life. They just really didn't care about people at all. They were very impatient with people. And if you would, if you didn't get math fast, you were sort of contemptible in their eyes. They did tremendous work. But this was all that mattered to them. And in fact, everything can be used creatively or destructively. All of these different ways can be used creatively or destructively. And one of the most poignant things that can happen is that math ability, which requires very strong horsepower, just thinking, runs out very early. In fact, the biggest reward in math is given for work done before you reach 40 years old, because they figure if you haven't done it by 40, you're never going to do it. And so when this runs out on mathematicians who have spent no time thinking about anything else, it's very, very tragic. And some of them actually do attempt suicide. A very famous mathematician, actually quite a few famous mathematicians attempted suicide when the math ability ran out. So the variety here is so interesting. The last group are competitors, and competitors think of mattering in zero-sum terms. To the extent that others matter, they matter less. It's taking something away from them. And they can be, they can be competitors about other individuals. They can be competitors about other groups. Like they belong to the group that matters the most. And when other groups seem to be gaining on them, they feel as if something's being taken away from them. This lies at the heart of some of, society's deepest ills: racism, sexism, classism, elitism, anti-Semitism, all of these kinds of isms, and some that we haven't even gotten around to naming yet. People who think of mattering in zero-sum terms. So it can have real societal implications.
Yeah. So, what are some good examples of great things that people do to matter to themselves and to others?
Yeah. Um, Oh, they're just, it depends like where you are on what I call the mattering map. So, there have been great scientists, great artists, who have, uh, they have to produce great art in order to be able to reconcile themselves to living with themselves. Um, Somebody who really, really interests me. I do profiles of various people because, theory is theory. You have to see how it plays out in individual lives. And some of them are famous and some of them aren't at all famous people. I know. I end the book talking about a woman in China. She's gone now. She's dead. But I had the great privilege of being able to speak to her daughter. Her daughter's name is Juju, and I had to speak to her through an interpreter. Juju's mother was an incredibly poor woman. Grew up during Mao Zedong, during the civil wars. Was orphaned by age 3. Doesn't even know where she came from, how old she was, who her parents were. And she became a garbage collector. She would pick up garbage and bring it to the recycling. And it was during the period of one child per family that China was worried about overpopulation, and so every Chinese family was only allowed to have one child, and for cultural reasons, reasons we can understand too, they wanted their one child to be a boy, not a girl, because throughout history boys have been considered to matter more than girls. This is also true. And so she was this garbage collector, and what she would find were little infant girls who were thrown out. She would find them in the dumpsters. She would find them in the public toilet. She would find them in the side of the road. And this woman, who could barely feed herself, and she had one natural child, she took these babies home to her hovel. She lived in a dilapidated, roofless, sort of real, old railroad station that had fallen apart. She didn't even have a roof over her head. She brought home more than 30 little girls whom she raised. And then she found other children that she was able to give to people who weren't able to have children. So she never left a baby there as a piece of garbage. And so this is like a magnificent human being. And I asked her daughter, um, did you ever want to find out who your birth mother was? And she started to cry, Juju, and said, I had the most wonderful mother. She gave me and my siblings, my sisters, everything that we could possibly ask for. And every child who passed through her arms was the luckiest child in the world. So this is, to me, one of the most heroic stories of I've ever heard. For her to feel that she mattered, she was on the side of life wherever she could find it. She lived for life. She lived for flourishing, to allow these young people to grow up into flourishing individuals. And Juju is a magnificent young woman. She's now the mother of 2. And it was just so it doesn't need to be something grand that's going to win you a Nobel Prize or an Oscar or um, it can be, well, I would say being on the side of life and flourishing, and on the side of creativity against destruction, on the side of beauty against ugliness,
Be on the side of humanity.
the side of humanity, and on the side, I would say, of all sentient creatures, and the life of the planet itself. That we can. There are so many. One of the sayings I love is from the Sufi mystic, um, Ad Rumi, who said, "Let let the beauty you love be the work that you do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel down and kiss the ground." This is very beautiful. There are so many ways that we can minister to this need to justify ourselves, that are ways not only for ourselves but for the life an existence beyond outside of ourselves. Another great saying from another master from another tradition, the Jewish tradition, Hillel the elder, who said, "If I'm not for myself, who will be for me?" Yeah, that's the mattering instinct. I have to be for myself. But if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And if not now, then when? Then great, great wisdom in these old masters.
In your book, you say that in today's workplace, workers are made to feel they are as fungible as snacks in a vending machine. That's some statement. Identical, interchangeable, and easily restocked. My goodness, not a
Yes,
great way to work for a company. Now they say something like 80 some odd percent of people are dissatisfied in their jobs. No wonder if they're
no
made to be
wonder.
filled like that. Perhaps you can expound more upon that incredible
Yes.
statement. And kind of funny but sad at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's no, this is really true that um that no deeper way to hurt somebody than to make them feel as if they don't matter. It is that, it
More
really,
important than money,
oh,
often
so
in
much more
discussions,
important.
is,
Yes.
they want recognition more than they even want the money.
They want the money for the sense of mattering. They want the fame for the sense of mattering, and they want the power for the this is what's at the heart of it all. So, there's just no deeper way of really hurting somebody than to through either your words or deeper through your actions, to just make them feel as if they don't matter. We spend most of our lives in our workplace, and if the signal going out is you are replaceable, there's nothing, you give us your all, and if you don't, we'll find somebody else who will. That this is not good. This is going to lead to a very, very deep dissatisfaction. And this kind of there's the novelist John DeLillo had written in one of his novels, "Longing on a large scale is what makes history." And there is no longing that is deeper than this longing to matter. If you treat people like they don't matter, the resentment will grow into mass movements that will change history, and in ways that we may not be able to control or want. So it's, as I say, it's such a deep motivation, and to ignore it is first of all, it's immoral. I think people have the right to feel as if they matter. I think people do matter. I think that's an ethical truth, and they have the right to be treated as if they matter. And that's a moral statement, but it's also a political statement, that if you don't treat people as if they matter, politics of resentment is going to grow. It's going to be fed by grievance and resentment and anger, and it can have consequences that we're not prepared uh, to accept. But the most important thing is that it's coming to everybody to feel like they matter. Hopefully, people got it in their original families. A lot of people haven't. One of the people I profile in the book is somebody who spent most of his youth as a neo-Nazi skinhead. He did terrible things. he came from a home in which he felt like he was garbage. His mother was an addict. His stepfather used him as a punching bag. He met some neo-Nazi skinheads who told him, "Oh, you matter more than anybody else. You're a white male, heterosexual American. These other people are stealing your mattering from you." These other groups, these lesser groups, and he became, a full-fledged member of the neo-Nazi party. In fact, a great leader in it. And it was that sense of feeling that he didn't matter, and the great anger he had about it, and a sense that other people had stolen it from him.
Interesting. So, I come across all kinds of people, billionaires, athletes, movie stars, entrepreneurs, and just regular, John Does. And the one common denominator is most people are rather stingy in their compliments. Now, a couple of words can make people matter and feel that they
Yeah.
matter, can make all the world of a difference. Why are most people so stingy in comp? They can be the most brilliant people in the world, yet they haven't learned the most basic thing, which is say a couple of nice things. You can say, "Nice shirt," it's been a great conversation. You really have a way with words, whatever. I mean, there's a million different ways to frame it. Why aren't most people stingy?
That is such a good question. That is such a good question. I mean, because, if everybody can reflect back on themselves and how good they feel when they get some words of
Yeah.
acknowledgement of kindness. So why not universalize that to everybody?
I
It's
get
so
it. Maybe
easy.
once a month I get a nice compliment or word, maybe.
Yeah.
But why isn't it 25 times a day by 25 different people?
Yes. Yes. And just to the person who checks you out of the grocery store, to just sort of this would be, when this would be a way of spreading joy it at such little expense. I think it's such a wonderful, it's such a, well, could I compliment you and say what a wonderful
I think about
observation
that
that
all the
is?
time because,
What a, yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
take a
yeah.
lot to make me feel, that I matter. And yet it's very, very rare, that people will say something nice. If they do, it tends to be somewhat superficial, but even the superficial can make you feel better. If
That's
somebody
right.
says nice shirt, I'll take it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But if
I'd
it
like
really,
something maybe a little more deeper, but I'll
that's
take
right.
that compliment even.
If it's something that, yeah, if you compliment somebody on what, really matters to them, boy, that really, that is a feeling of joyfulness. I that ought to be put out into the world. I think that is that is absolutely true. Yep. And yeah, I endorse this.
So, what do you think that the 2020 pandemic, which you talk about in your book,
Yeah.
do to our sense of mattering?
Um, yeah, so I think, you know, uh, and there's empirical evidence for this, that the thought of death, that we might die, which, we like to keep at a way back in the back of our minds. We don't want to think about that too much. Um, but it very much heightens this feeling of, I don't want my life to have been a waste. That this is it, and it really kind of brings the mattering instinct to the forefront. And so um, I think that, and when that question is brought to the forefront and we start considering it, I mean, could my life be a waste? What have I really done here to justify myself? Would the world move on exactly the same after I'm gone as if I had never been here? This is a terrible thought. This is all a way of trying to express, that we want to matter. And so I think that it sharpened this feeling, and it sharpened the sort of existential anxiety that these questions can bring up in us. I had a lot of people I know who, were didn't go to their work, decided during the pandemic they didn't want to go back to that
Yeah.
work. They wanted to do something entirely different. And I think that, somebody said
It
nothing
woke them up,
concentrated.
right? Something
It
deep
woke them up.
inside them, yeah, woke up.
Exactly. So in that sense, it was a good thing. There were many, many bad things about the pandemic. It's very, very hard, for the children who weren't going to school and weren't socialized in the way that they ought to have been. And this is playing out now. But I think in the sense of making people sort of take their lives a little more seriously, um, with the thought of death a little too much in their minds, um, was, from my point of view, a good thing. I think that we ought to think about this more. We don't have unlimited time here.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that we need that wake up call, that proximity to death, as you call it in your book,
Yeah, yeah.
great words, proximity to death, in order for us sometimes to be shaken and then really start to live a, more authentic life. Last question I have before we close out, is there something we must do or be to matter, or do we matter just because we exist and are alive?
I think we do matter, and to the extent that any one of us matters, we all matter in that moral sense to the exact same, extent. This is the basis of morality. In philosophy, we have many different theories of morality, but they all presume that all individuals matter, all human beings matter, and to the same extent. But but that doesn't in itself, I think that gives us the guardrails for morality. If your mattering project somehow demands of you that you undermine other people's mattering, rethink your mattering project. It's the wrong mattering project. But um, we each face our own uh, existential moment when we realize, gee, I seem to think I matter an awful lot. Um, Can I justify that in any way? Can I make sure I'm not being, I don't know, just an idiot in the way I'm going through my life and squandering it, and it's just really a waste of potential. And there, I think there is right no right way to. There are many right ways to do it, and there are wrong ways of doing it. Wrong ways is to the wrong way is undermine other people's mattering. Or sometimes the wrong ways involve that you feel you require something of yourself that it's not going to happen. I could say as a professor that the worst part of being a professor is sometimes like a graduate student who wants to go into your field, and you have to use your judgment as a professor and tell them, I don't think this is, you're very smart, you're very talented, but this is not a good way to meet your talents. This is for various reasons, have nothing to do with intelligence but maybe you don't work well on your own, what you have to do, or you're not self-disciplined enough. Um, so, your mentoring project could be bad for you. It could be bad for other people, in undermining their mattering. But other than that, there are just as I said, there are so many ways to kneel down and kiss the ground, and make your life something worth living. And so, whether you're a transcender or a heroic striver, or what I call a socializer, and even a competitor, there are ways to be creative and avoid being destructive.
Well, the name of Rebecca's book is The Mattering Instinct: How Our Deepest Longing Drive Us and Divides Us. Go out and get a copy if you'd like to understand better why significance and mattering means so much to all of us. Thank you so much for being on our show today, Rebecca.
Well, thank you, Eli. And may I say, you are a wonderful interviewer. You really are. And I also like your shirt, but you're But you're a wonderful interviewer.
Thank you for helping me matter.
Thank you.